Hello, and welcome to yet another fun-filled episode of Heavy Metal 101! John! I was hella old school HM 101 in that introduction. Did you notice?
How many years have we been doing this?
This is our third season finale. So that's 3 years.
There's no way we've been doing this 3 years.
John, when this started, you were but a child, and now you're a man. Yeah, that's how I used to begin episodes, was with just like a relatively simple little lead-in, as opposed to these elaborate, stupid skits that we've started doing.
Ah, yes.
You see the change there.
Yes, I do.
I mean, I guess I'm just feeling sentimental. I mean, as we can obviously tell, it's impossible to believe that this is the final episode of our third season, right?
Well, I mean, you decide what determines a season, and you decide how many episodes we do, and it's really just entirely up to you. So none of this is terribly difficult for me to believe in any way when I sit down and think about it. But I try not to think about it at any point in my life. So in that regard, yes.
Shocking! It's madness, John. It's frickin' madness. Well, so in order to properly celebrate what is truly a monumental achievement of ours...
If we do say so ourselves.
If we do. We are monumentally important people doing monumentally important things. And I thought we might give something back. Give something back to our intrepid listening public. Aww. You see, on today's season finale, we're going to cut through all of the bullshit. And you know how I love bullshit, right?
I do know how you love bullshit.
And we're cutting through it. And we're going to just suggest a whole bunch of truly incredible, essential 1980s heavy metal albums that I believe all fans of the genre should acquaint themselves with. Now, doesn't this seem like a thoughtful and laudable episode goal?
Yeah.
We're being nice. We're giving back to the community, the HM 101 community, from which we've taken so much joy.
We take joy?
All right, maybe not we. I take joy for both of us. I take two times the joy. All right, so, usually I spend about 80% of any given episode attempting to demonstrate how witty, creative, and irreverent I am. But none of that poppycock today. No, sir. Today, we're just going to strap on our big boy panties and get seriously focused and just talk about great music. We're going to get on to it now, but first, we're going to do just a brief, tiny.
For some of that bullshit we said we're not doing today. Here's a little bit.
It might be a little whimsical. It might be a little irreverent, but it's going to be brief. An advertisement for our forthcoming, absolutely fucking delightful fourth season. Advertising commence. Hi there. This is Eric from the internationally renowned Heavy Metal 101 podcast. Yes, it's true. We are going to need to step away for a few months, once again, in order to recharge our mystical, satanic, heavy metal history batteries. But fear not, good listener, because next fall, we shall return more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
But teacher, I have so much left to learn.
Yes, young scholar. You have come so far, and yet the journey ahead is still longer and more treacherous.
I'm afraid.
Yes. You should be.
Next season on Heavy Metal 101.
You're telling me they burned down churches and murdered each other?
Yes! Blood, fire, death.
Iron Maiden with Bruce. It's so beautiful.
Perhaps the most beautiful thing this world has ever known, but perhaps it was too beautiful for this foul earth, for this flawed people. You see, it simply couldn't last. Welcome to sunny Florida, home to Disney World, palm trees, rollerblades, and death metal. Coming this fall, Heavy Metal 101 Season number 4. It's a lot like Season number 3, but way fucking better! Okay, enough with the damn whimsy. Jesus, let's just do this thing. John, you ready to do the thing?
Let's do the thing.
All right, here's the plan. We're going to take this discussion year by year, chronologically surveying some of the most essential artists and albums from the heavy metal of the entire decade. That's 1980 through 1989. Now, how's that sound?
Sounds like if you talk about more than 10 artists, you lied.
You're in trouble. By the time we're done, you are going to have yourself one hell of a summer listening list, my friend. Okay, J-Rock, read us on in, would ya?
The best heavy metal of 1980.
The year 1980 was ground zero for the new, leaner, meaner, and more focused strain of heavy metal that would soon rise to cultural domination throughout much of the world. This was due in large part to the new wave of British heavy metal. John, do you remember our good friends of the Nawabum?
I remember that we talked about the Nawabum.
Indeed. That's all I can ask, I suppose. Now, that movement had fully matured by 1980 and would go on to produce some of the finest albums of that year. Most particularly, two albums we covered enthusiastically back in the day. The magnificent self-titled debut of the mighty Iron Maiden, as well as the shamefully underappreciated masterpiece that was the eponymous debut of Angel Witch. John, who do you think would win in a heavy metal Nawabum mega music brawl? Iron Maiden circa 1980 or Angel Witch circa 1980?
Probably Iron Maiden.
It's fair. That's fair. I don't think it's actually as much of an easy choice as we would think. I, too, would have to pick Iron Maiden, considering how wildly different their respective career trajectories would go on to be. But that having been said, it's pretty amazing how close their debut albums were in quality. Both are really fucking great.
Yes, indeed.
Meanwhile, the old heavy metal guard, which had laid the groundwork for the Nawabum, was also in peak artistic form in 1980, with the newly Dio-led Black Sabbath releasing their iconic Heaven and Hell, and both Motorhead and AC/DC reaching their respective career peaks via Ace of Spades and Back in Black. And the great Van Halen was also busily keeping up their masterful streak of killer Roth-era albums via the fun-filled Women and Children First. John, that's two bands you like and one band you hate, right?
Yes, though surprisingly, at least the song Ace of Spades, I'm a fan.
It's a hell of a song. You weren't so into the rest of the stuff I played you from that album.
That's accurate, but I do like that song.
All right, I respect that. You're a good man. So just so everyone is clear, John, could you read off the official list of HM101 approved heavy metal masterpieces from 1980 that we have thus far suggested?
I will, though I'm just going to ask a clarifying question for our listeners at home. Are we suggesting, because some of these are the same, are we suggesting specifically albums or tracks?
Oh, that's a very important plot point. While there are a lot of songs with the same name as these albums, as you mentioned, we are suggesting entire, or at least I am suggesting entire albums. John might feel differently about
right,
some of these
because why would
albums.
we go minimal when we could go maximal? We could make you a succinct playlist of the best songs from the 1980s that might be good for a road trip, but instead what we're going to do is give you 30 years worth of listening to accomplish.
That's what we do here, John.
That's right. And so those albums are Iron Maiden's Iron Maiden, Angel Witch's Angel Witch, Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell, Motorhead's Ace of Spades, AC/DC's Back in Black, and Van Halen, Women and Children First.
A rogues gallery of kick-ass metal albums. Everyone must needs listen to each and every one of them. That includes you, John. That said, I do want to be remarkably foolish and to also suggest a single quote-unquote best metal album for each year. We'll read off that best list just one more time at the conclusion of today's episode, so people like John, who don't want to spend countless hours listening to every single moment of this episode repeatedly, will still have a relatively streamlined collection of 80s metal essentials to peruse. Now, isn't that thoughtful of me, John?
Eric will put a time code in the program notes so you know where to skip to get the information you actually care about.
Never! Anyhow, to my mind, the freshest, sharpest, and most significant heavy metal album of 1980 was the one that featured the unbelievably extraordinary guitar work of the late, oh so very great Randy Rhoads. My pick for the best heavy metal album of 1980 is Ozzy Osbourne's solo debut, Blizzard of Oz. Yeah, baby! Moving on!
The best heavy metal of 1981.
John, are you aware of the fact that I have, in recent years, spent much of my free time working away in the proverbial listening coal mines, closely examining every single metal album I could track down on a year-by-year basis?
I know you spend a lot of time listening to music that no one has asked you to listen to.
I am an oral adventurer, my friend, a spelunker of sounds. Following my multiple in-depth surveys of the heavy metal that was specifically released in 1981, the first thing that I might note is that, generally speaking, 1981 was a somewhat less strong year than the mighty 1980. They can't all be 1986, John, right?
Sure.
You know it. In 81, there were a lot of incredible bands putting out albums that just weren't quite as strong as their predecessors from 1 year earlier. Ozzy released the great, but rather rushed, Diary of a Madman. AC/DC's For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, does have some really good tunes, but it is about 1/zillionth as good as Back in Black. Iron Maiden's Killers and Judas Priest's Point of Entry are each in the running for the weakest albums by each of those bands, etc. Oh, and I guess now is as good a time as any to point out that I didn't include Priest's legendary British Steel on that Best of 1980 list. So look, anyone who hasn't heard that album should definitely give it a listen. I'll be honest, it really is an essential classic. I'm biased. It's not one of my favorite Priest albums, so sue me. John, do you think anyone's actually going to sue me if I say these things?
No, but I'd love to see it happen.
I mean, that would be good publicity, I think. Maybe they should sue me.
Yeah, look, no one's coming for me. I have nothing to offer.
You're probably safe here. I think that's entirely fair. But look, I've got bias. I didn't include British Steel. I am going to say now for the record, retroactive inclusion, 1980, Judas Priest, British Steel. Are we good with that?
I don't understand why we're doing this when A, we're reading a written script. It's not like we're talking off the cuff. And B, we could have just put it back where you wanted to. Like we're just spending a lot of time on whimsical shit here, Eric.
I can't get away from the whimsy, John. I just can't. I love the whimsy. The point here is that there were also a lot of fairly meh releases from some of the best bands around in 1981. That's the point I'm trying to make. That's the important thing.
So what you're saying is we won't give them anything from 1981. We'll just say, hey, by the way, listen to that Priest album too?
No, we're gonna list all that shit now. There still were some very impressive metal releases in 1981. I'm just trying to provide context. Can I not provide context?
You surely can. If there's one thing you can do, it is provide context.
It might be my superpower. Okay, so 1981, great and essential albums. On their third album, Breaker, those German meisters from the band Accept truly found their artistic feet. Also, the always discussed as influential but not nearly so often listened to these days, Hanoi Rocks, released their fantastic debut, Bangkok Shocks, Saigon Shakes, Hanoi Rocks. Now, I'm not really entirely sure I'd personally call it a heavy metal album, but it was hugely influential to many a pop metal and particularly glam metal band, and it holds up just extraordinarily well. Well worth a listen. And of course, our good friends from DLR-era Van Halen continued their streak of celluloid perfection with 1981's surprisingly bleak, but still wonderful, Fair Warning. So, we've got a considerably shorter list for 1981. But read it real good, John boy.
Accepts, Breaker, Hanoi Rocks, Bangkok Shocks, Saigon Shakes, Hanoi Rocks, and Van Halen, Fair Warning.
Ooh, hardcore metalheads are going to be grumpy about the fact that 2 of the just 3 albums we listed are pop metal. There's definitely going to be angry metal villagers bearing pitchforks and torches after this one. John, don't you think that those angry villagers should visit our Spotify for Podcasters page and leave us an assortment of outraged voicemails?
Absolutely, yes. We're always happy to get your voicemails, especially the angry ones.
That would be really swell, everybody. Oh, and I'm not sure that my top pick for 1981 is going to help with the high level of listener ire. You see, for 1981, I've got a best of twofer.
You suck at following the rules that you established for yourself in an infuriating way.
I'm like an incredibly complex algorithm. I just generate information at this wildly unpredictable rate. So, the very best heavy metal albums to come out in 1981 were courtesy of not one, but two British bands on completely opposite poles of the genre's stylistic spectrum. Def Leppard's High and Dry is a nearly perfect pop metal masterpiece. And Venom's Welcome to Hell is an absolute killer, which established the template for oodles of incredible extreme metal yet to come. I love both of those albums and would suggest that collectively they did a perfect job of establishing some of the outer boundaries on either side of heavy metal's big tent circa 1981. John, it's still early and we're already courting controversy. I know that Heavy Metal 101 will be an integral component of your eventual application for academic tenure. Are you comfortable with all of this aesthetic shock and awe?
Comfortable's a strong word.
You'll allow it without signing off?
Sure. I'll abstain.
All right. It's fair enough. I'm thinking maybe we should just move things along to the next year. How about that?
The best heavy metal of 1982.
Obviously, John, the best heavy metal album of 1982 was Split Beavers, When Hell Won't Have You. Just kidding. But Split Beaver, that's quite a band name, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Actually, the best heavy metal album of 1982 is, once again, a toss-up. And this is a toss-up between two absolute masterpieces of the genre. In 1982, we have Judas Priest's Screaming for Vengeance and Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast. 666. Both are absolutely fan-frickin-tastic. And while I won't say one is better than the other, personally, I'm team Screaming for Vengeance, which is one of my all-time favorite albums. What about you, John? We haven't covered either of those albums, but would you describe yourself as generally team Judas Priest, or team Iron Maiden, or team Big Stupid Head who cares about nothing?
Well, as you just pointed out, we haven't listened to either of those albums, so I'm loath to just tell you which one I think is better without any fucking context. And I've liked things from both of those bands, but I do tend to like Judas Priest a little bit more.
John is drawing a line in the sand. It's all Judas Priest all the time. I like it. It's a stand, and that means something here. Meanwhile, 1982's honorable, holy crap, these albums are awesome mentions go to both yet another Van Halen album. Are you seeing a theme here? Their somewhat underappreciated gem, Diver Down, an album which generally fans are a little bit less hot on, but I just absolutely love. Just totally love that album. And also to the world's introduction to HM 101's beloved Merciful Fate, an EP which is generally known by the name Nuns Have No Fun. A corpse without soul, doomed by the living dead. It's amazing! John, do you remember those particular tunes from your playlist for our Merciful Fate deep dive episode?
Sure don't.
No. Well, then I will say retrospectively, you just loved them. They were some of your favorite songs you've ever heard, I think is what you said.
That sounds like something I'd say.
Yeah, you were just spilling over with enthusiasm. I think we discussed getting matching Merciful Fate tattoos.
I'm well known for my eager commitment to tattoos.
That is kind of your signature move, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You are, if I may say so myself, a fortunate fellow to have been exposed to such a wealth of musical greatness. You're welcome, John. Meanwhile, on the next tier are some incredible albums by some incredible bands, which are just perhaps not quite on the same level as the very, very best of 1982. These other awesome releases include Venom's iconic genre-founding second album, Black Metal, and Manowar's wonderful debut, Battle Hymns. Also on this tier are some great albums by great bands that just happen to release even better albums adjacent to these otherwise exceptional releases. Motorhead's Iron Fist, for instance, is grand. It just isn't on the same level as Ace of Spades. Kiss's Creatures of the Night was a much-needed and surprisingly heavy return to form, but they would do many of the same things even better on the following year's Lick It Up. The same could be said of work by two of the great German bands in 1982. The Scorpions' Blackout is damn awesome, but it demonstrates a formula they would go on to perfect on their next release, Love at First Sting. Meanwhile, Accept must be acknowledged for opening 1982's Restless and Wild with arguably the first thrash song, the absolutely killer Fast as a Shark. But they, too, would shortly be taking their songwriting to the next level on the subsequent Balls to the Wall. Still, even if they're eclipsed by other releases in their respective bands' catalogs, all those albums kick ass and everyone should listen to them. Yay! Now, John, today's project, generally, is to provide a list of the very most excellent and essential metal albums of each year of the 1980s. But every once in a while, I would like to throw a bone to the more experienced 80s metalheads out there who are already familiar with the entry-level stuff, and to provide a list of some slightly less well-known gems from a given year. Alright. Here are a couple somewhat less well-known Nawabum killers, well worth a listen from 1982. My favorite of the bunch is by Girls' School. John, you remember Girls' School? We love them.
Yeah, I struggled with saying that band name. I don't know, there's just something about it written down that looks weird to me.
Kind of a portmanteau, right? Girls' School.
Yeah.
They're a great band. Regardless, a freaking great band. Girls' School's Screaming Blue Murder is an excellent album that I don't think enough people talk about. Meanwhile, two exceptional 1982 Nawabum debuts include the psychedelic doom of Witchfinder General's Death Penalty and Tank's rugged, Motorhead-esque Filth Hounds of Hades. Worthy of note, that latter was produced by Motorhead's own Fast Eddie Clarke. Motorhead fans, check out Tank. Great Nawabum band. Last but not least, that other Nawabum extra nasty power trio, Raven, released their deliciously unhinged sophomore album, Wiped Out. 1982, a hell of a year in classic heavy metal. John, remind me of what the hell I just listed. I've already totally forgotten.
So has everyone else. 1982's very best includes, holy shit. Eric, this is such a long list. What are you doing?
It's great music.
The point of offering these type of lists is to make succinct commentary, to pin the very, very best, not to just say, hey man, so many good things were happening. Listen to it all.
These are the very, very best.
No, the very, very best is one thing. This is Judas Priest's Screaming for Vengeance and Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, with honorable mentions, including Van Halen's Diver Down. And we're going to include an EP, Merciful Fate's Nuns Have No Fun. And then we're going to talk about some other things that you don't even think are the best, you just want to mention them, which would be Manowar's Battle Hymns, Kiss's Creatures of the Night, Motorhead's Iron Fist, Venom's Black Metal, Scorpions' Blackout, and Accept's Restless and Wild. Have we talked about that Accept is a shitty band name on this show?
You have bridled at it before for some reason. I'm not sure why you have such a problem with the name Accept.
It's a terrible band name.
Oh, you can't accept it?
No, and I won't.
You're not willing to make an exception for it?
I will not.
All right. Well, John hath spoken. Look, we've got a lot of albums from 1982. I get it. What can I say? All years were not created equal. Also, a reminder of those lesser-known Nawabum gems: Tank, Filth Hounds of Hades, Witchfinder General, Death Penalty, Girls' School, Screaming Blue Murder, and Raven, Wiped Out. John, you've sure got a whole bunch of listening to do, but it's going to have to wait. For now, we must move this thing along. Do your thing, cuz...
The best heavy metal of 1983.
Now we're getting into the thick of it. By 1983, heavy metal's golden age had truly begun. Admittedly, the Nawabum was now winding down, but American pop and thrash metal were just beginning their own wild and woolly ascent towards popular cultural domination. Quiet Riot was the first heavy metal band to hit #1 on the Billboard album charts. Metallica hit the lights, and it was just generally a hell of a time in heavy metal. Arguably the most important heavy metal storyline of 1983 was the birth of thrash, although that actual term still wouldn't be coined for another year. John, do you remember that sordid tale which we told many episodes ago on this here heavy metal podcast about the birth of thrash?
Yes.
You don't want me to tell it again?
No.
All right, you win this time. Now, most people would probably agree that the first definitive thrash metal album was Metallica's masterful debut, Kill 'Em All. John, you liked Kill 'Em All.
I did like Kill 'Em All.
There we go. Kill 'Em All certainly is the best thrash album of 1983. I would not argue that. However, Canadian speed metal masters Exciter did debut their own brand of fast, furious, punk-informed heavy metal 6 weeks earlier on their excellent album, Heavy Metal Maniac. Food for thought. John, are you comfortable with the idea of a Canadian metal band having possibly released the first legitimate thrash album?
I don't think it matters.
But you're comfortable.
Sure.
Or you're just generally uncomfortable with all of it?
Oh, I'm uncomfortable with all of this, yes. Nothing we've done has made me comfortable.
Regardless, these two albums weren't the only big news in the thrash of 1983. Slayer's fantastic first album, Show No Mercy, also arrived just a few short months later. Slayer! It was an embarrassment of heavy, heavy riches. On the very other end of the spectrum, some of the greatest pop metal of all time also arrived in 1983. John's favorite band name, Accept, had their wonderful Balls to the Wall. John, do you like that album title?
I mean, it's funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Well, on that album, we find the band at their very most polished and accessible. And with their proverbial balls up against the proverbial wall, no less. Fun! The newly makeup-free Kiss released what was probably the finest album of their post-makeup career, Lick It Up. And of course, John's very favorite glam metal band of all, Motley Crue, were busy burning up the charts with what is most definitely the very best album of their career, the pop metal classic Shout at the Devil. Meanwhile, in the middle ground lurking between pop and thrash were a couple of stone classics of traditional metal. Dio's utterly fabulous solo debut, Holy Diver, and the fourth in an unbroken sequence of unfucking believably great 1980s Iron Maiden albums, the mighty Peace of Mind. John, we'll be deep diving the entirety of the first Bruce era of Iron Maiden in season number 4. Are you excited about that?
Have we talked about Iron Maiden on this show?
Yes, so we talked extensively about the debut album, and we talked a little bit about Killers, their sophomore album, but we have pretty coyly avoided talking about any of their other wildly classic 1980s albums.
Right, because why would we talk about the music that metal fans like when we could talk about the stuff they hate?
I'm a contrarian. What do you want from me? No, we're going to deep dive and totally, utterly embrace these classic Iron Maiden albums. They're some of the greatest of all time. I'm very excited about it. It's just coming next season. Can you wait a little bit? Can you get off my ass? Can you just relax?
I don't know.
Well, it's exciting stuff. What a fucking discography. Now, before I get to my vote for the single best metal album of this incredibly impressive year, I wanted to detour again into discussing just a few comparably obscure / overlooked gems from 1983. Please cue the obscure / overlooked gem underscore. I've dove deep into the particular heavy metal of 1983 a few times now, and each time I've stumbled upon some especially fantastic albums / bands I'd somehow never heard before. The first time around, it was Satan with their delightful Court in the Act. Yes, it's a stupid album title, but what a wonderful no-album classic. The second time around, I discovered a brand new musical obsession I have talked about at some length on this here podcast, the work of the all-female power trio, Rock Goddess. Particularly of note is their exceptional self-titled debut, which sounds to me a bit like Pat Benatar but on steroids, which is a very good thing. A few other under-discussed albums worthy of note include the surprising heft of Europe's self-titled debut, the always dependable Hanoi Rocks' Back to Mystery City, the fun-filled pop metal of Helix on No Rest for the Wicked, and arguably one of the most underrated metal albums of all time, Manila Road, with their truly amazing Crystal Logic. So much greatness! I really do suggest listening to all of the above repeatedly. These are absolutely awesome albums. And yet, only one album was the very best metal release of 1983. And yes, it was indeed a better debut album than even Kill 'Em All, John. That would be the darkly majestic, full-length debut of Denmark's favorite satanic sons, Merciful Fate. Melissa is the best damned, that pun is intended, heavy metal album of 1983. You know, they often say that Satan gets all the best music, and in this case, that is most definitely true. All hail the king! All hail Merciful Fate! John, hail Satan and read the list, my friend.
Merciful Fate's Melissa. Going on.
Oh, John, you're editing shamefully. Fine, read this damn list.
So in addition to the one album we promised you, Eric would also like to recommend 17 other albums, including Metallica's Kill 'Em All, Exciter's Heavy Metal Maniac,
My new nickname for John!
Slayer's Show No Mercy, Accepts, I can't believe you're making me say this band name so many fucking times in this episode, Accepts Balls to the Wall,
I'm pretty sure this is the last one for what it's worth.
Kiss's Lick It Up, Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil, Dio's Holy Diver, and Iron Maiden's Peace of Mind.
A goodly sized list, as John has already pointed out. And you veteran metalheads out there, don't sleep on the lesser known gems. Europe, self-titled, Hanoi Rocks, Back to Mystery City, Helix, No Rest for the Wicked, Satan, Court in the Act, Rock Goddess, self-titled, and also, while we're at it, Hell Hath No Fury, the second album they released in 1983, and Manila Road, Crystal Logic. Wow, 1983 was an impressive year. And yet, 1983 is just a preview, a hint, a mere amuse-bouche compared to what was to come. John, bring it on!
The best heavy metal of 1984.
1984 was a mind-blowingly excellent year in heavy metal. It would be tough to argue that it was not, in fact, the genre's most extraordinary year up to this point. And even from the vantage point of 2024, it can and should still be understood as one of the all-time great years for heavy metal releases. The old masters, particularly, were at the very top of their game, releasing some of their finest albums. Iron Maiden, Power Slave, Van Halen, 1984, Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith, and Scorpions, Love at First Sting. A still young Metallica created the first definitive thrash metal masterpiece, Ride the Lightning, and a few of the essential monuments of early extreme metal were also released that year. Bathory's self-titled debut, the Hellhammer EP, Apocalyptic Raids, Celtic Frost's Morbid Tales, which actually was also originally an EP, and the legendary Mantis demo, Death by Metal. John, don't you think that list deserves one of our patented yowzas? Could you, in honor of this very special occasion, please give us a John Yowza?
I don't know that I've ever said that word in the history of my life.
Could this be the time?
I just... You want me to say yowza?
You did it! You're done! You've accomplished the goal. Thank you. Additionally, there was also... You didn't think you were going to do it, but you did it. There was quite possibly the finest glam metal debut since Van Halen's back in 1978. That would be Rats, Out of the Cellar. And what was arguably Merciful Fate's finest album, Don't Break the Oath. All of that, and the debut of the surprisingly impressive Mark II Ozzy Osbourne lineup, featuring Jake E. Lee's six-string wizardry on Bark at the Moon. I could go on and on. But John, I probably shouldn't do that, should I?
No, you should not.
All right. Well, I'm working on my brevity. I'm working on it.
Remains to be seen.
You're not going to like this.
Oh my God. I just scrolled down. Oh my God.
A few little things to listen to for those who already know all of the 1984 classics. I would suggest Warlords and the Cannons of Destruction Have Begun, Cloven Hoofs, self-titled, and just one more. The always and ever underappreciated Hanoi Rocks' final masterpiece, Two Steps from the Move. All of those are well worth a look. Additionally, a brief nod to the metal women of 1984. Lita Ford found her pop metal footing with her excellent second release, Dancin' on the Edge, and Doro Pesh with Warlock debuted with the incredible Burning the Witches. All of our listeners will be absolutely floored by all of the above, and choosing a best album of 1984 is a bit of a fool's errand. However, if I had to choose a finest metal album from that amazing metal year, the award would have to go to Maiden's fucking brilliant Power Slave, which is a serious candidate for the single greatest metal album of all time. Honorable mention goes to the simply incredible eponymous debut of Bathory, which magnificently set the template for a whole generation of black metal to come. I also can't not mention that quite possibly the finest single album side in the history of metal belongs to Priest's Defenders of the Faith, Side 1. So fucking good. There's just so much impressive heavy metal music in 1984. Go team! John, you're going to find it exhausting, but please do read back that their list. Real pretty like.
Eric's best heavy metal albums of 1984 include the ultimate winner of Eric's completely useless best designation, Iron Maiden's Power Slave, as well as his honorable mentions, Bathory.
Bathory, you douche!
I know, I just like saying Bathory.
Show some respect.
No. The side 1 of Judas Priest's Defenders of the Faith.
Side 2 is great too. Just listen to the whole fucking thing. It's great. It's great.
Other complete diminishing of the word essentials include Van Halen's 1984, Scorpions, Love at First Sting, Metallica's Ride the Lightning, Hellhammer's Apocalyptic Hellhammer. We've never even talked about that band.
You weren't involved with that episode? It was a Halloween special before I had you on Halloween specials.
Got it. Hellhammer's Apocalyptic Raids, Celtic Frost's Morbid Tales, Mantis's Death by Metal.
A goddamned demo making the list. Wow.
Rats Out of the Cellar, Merciful Fate, Don't Break the Oath, and Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon.
I told you it was a hell of a year. And don't forget about the lesser-known gems by Warlord, Cloven Hoof, Hanoi Rocks, Lita Ford, and Warlock.
Too late.
That's why we repeat these things, John. Now they're back. Now, not only is 1984 a monumental year in metal, but it also marks the halfway point in this gargantuan anti-listicle which we are creating. Time to smoke if you got 'em, stretch the legs, and take a little listening break. We're going to go with the choose-your-own-adventure format for this listening break. Now, isn't that fun?
So you say they're just sent away now to go and listen to something without any guidance whatsoever?
No, they're going to have two choices with guidance.
It's not much of an adventure.
No, shut up. If you are a metal novice, or if you just feel like rocking the fuck out, you should click on the appropriate link in the show notes and check out the preposterously awesome opening track off Iron Maiden's preposterously awesome Power Slave, the iconic Aces High. Note particularly the ridiculously great vocal performance by our beloved air raid siren, Bruce. Speaking of ridiculously awesome vocal performances, if you want to explore something a little bit more obscure and a whole lot more introspective, check out my very favorite Warlock tune, Without You, which also has an absolutely killer vocal. Hell, maybe just listen to both of them. That's what we're gonna do. We'll catch you on the other side for the compelling, electric second half of the best of 1980s heavy metal! And we're back. John, are you feeling rejuvenated by all of that heavy metal power?
That is a word you could use.
Well, regardless, it is time to move on.
The best heavy metal of 1985.
Okay then, midway through the 1980s, in the year of our beloved Satanic Lord, 1985, heavy metal was busily reaching one of those periodic genre inflection points, in which at one extreme, thrash was blossoming into its early artistic maturity, while at the other end of the spectrum, pop metal was ascending, for better and worse, toward its peak period of musical and cultural domination. John, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. But we are just going to focus on the good shit, if that's okay with you.
How about we take it a step further and only focus on the best shit?
I can go with that. Yes. Just the best shit. Much of the finest metal of 1985 came from the heavier end of the metal genre continuum. This was the year of 3 of thrash metal's finest debut albums: Megadeth's Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, Overkill's Feel the Fire, and Exodus's monumental and long overdue Bonded by Blood. Additionally, Anthrax finally honed in on their own rather unique take on the classic thrash sound via the wonderful Spreading the Disease. Meanwhile, even more extreme metal subgenres were a-flowering. Bathory was back with the challenging, abrasive The Return, further trailblazing an early Scandinavian black metal sound, while Celtic Frost were taking metal to an array of extreme new places never previously imagined: death, doom, black, symphonic, etc., on the utter stone classic 2 Mega Therion. John, when the fuck are we going to do a Celtic Frost episode?
You run every single aspect of this show.
Oh. Well, we need to get on that shit. Anyhow, in the US, SOD, that's Stormtroopers of Death to you and me, with tongue firmly planted in cheek on Speak English or Die, and Carnivore, with their own rather cheeky self-titled debut, were helping to pioneer the crossover thrash sound, synthesizing elements of thrash and hardcore, and quite a little bit of, humor. Offensive humor, but humor nonetheless. At the very same time, Texas legends Watchtower first introduced the world to tech thrash on their challenging, complex, energetic disassembly. John, are you more of a crossover thrash guy or more of a tech thrash guy?
I had a viscerally negative response to the phrase tech thrash, so I guess crossover.
All right. I could see you rocking out to some Carnivore. I think that'd be fun. It's all really good stuff.
Are we ever going to talk about that shit on this show, or are you just going to throw out those 2 extremely difficult to mentally conjure a musical image for terms and move on, never to be spoken of again?
We literally just talked about frickin' Watchtower like 2 episodes ago on our prog metal episode, you moron.
I don't think so.
God.
I'm pretty sure I would have remembered that.
In defense of you, we have not talked about crossover, which we probably should, and I am hoping to be able to get to it in the context of our season 4 episodes. It just hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened. Carnivore is the precursor band to the amazing goth metal band Typo Negative from the 90s, so certainly that lineage will be discussed at some point. But not yet. We'll get there. We're just not there yet. It's fair. You're calling me out. Most of it's stupid. But I have not talked about crossover thrash yet. Apologies, John. Apologies. All that having been said, pop metal was not without its own 1985 standouts. Bon Jovi were making great strides towards finding their pitch-perfect pop metal sound on 7800 Fahrenheit, as were HM101's much-beloved Stryper on the inconsistent but frequently utterly extraordinary Soldiers Under Command. Dokken were at or at least near their artistic peak on Under Lock and Key, and even Dio were sowing some amount of pop metal oats of their own on the extremely enjoyable, somewhat poppy Sacred Heart. Also, shout out to just one underrated pop metal gem, featuring the great Steve Vai on guitar no less, Disturbing the Peace by Alcatraz, with 2 Z's, obviously. John, before I thrill the opinion-hungry masses and announce my top metal album for 1985, Mike, could you give us a quick summary?
The very best heavy metal of 1985. Stripers.
See, this is the best. Doesn't start with Stryper, but whatever. I know Stryper's always on your
Stryper. Under Command.
Soldiers. You don't even know the name of the album.
I am reading what you wrote down.
Oh, there's a typo there. You're right. Sorry. All right, read the list, you bastard.
Megadeth's Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. Overkill's Feel the Fire. Exodus, Bonded by Blood. Anthrax, Spreading the Disease. Bathory, The Return.
Which is more properly entitled The Return of the Darkness and Evil. And the band is called Bathory.
Celtic Frost, 2 Mega Therion. SOD, Speak English or Die. Carnivore, Watchtower, Energetic Disassembly, Bon Jovi, 7,800 degrees Fahrenheit, Striper, soldiers under command. Dokken, under lock and key. Dio, Sacred Heart. Alcatraz, disturbing the peace.
So there were a lot of really amazing metal albums in 1985, though honestly, as a totality, I might argue it was a comparably weaker year, accepting the assortment of masterpieces above, of course. There's a lot of music, all that stuff was great. As a totality, not quite as strong. They can't all be 1986, and yet, despite that, this was also the year that the almighty Slayer truly became Slayer on the iconic, terrifying, and surprisingly progressive Hell Awaits. It is pure, perfect, evil adrenaline in musical form, and it was the very best heavy metal album of 1985. John, could you give us one of your patented, truly gorgeous Slayer roars before we move on?
How about instead you retake that last one because you sounded a little bit constipated?
You're such a cock. You're just a cock. You're supposed to sound constipated. That's like half of the thing.
That's half of the thing? That butt tension that makes it Slayer?
I think that's actually totally accurate, yes.
Wow, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Slayer.
We might cut that because it didn't sound like it worked, but we'll see. We'll see. Onwards!
The best heavy metal of 1986.
This is the year. Numero uno, the best. Or most definitely one of the best. It is most certainly in that discussion. What might one actually say about the year 1986 in heavy metal music that hasn't already been said 1,000 times? This was one of those truly crazy years in which it seems impossible that so many incredible albums could have been released in just a single 365-day span. Slayer's Reign in Blood, Metallica's Master of Puppets, Megadeth's Peace Sells But Who's Buying, all in the same frickin' year? What? John, can you even believe it?
I can't even believe that you were able to so succinctly state all of that information about the best year of metal, and now we get to move on.
Yeah.
Well, there it was. You said the 3 best albums. 3.
There might be a few more we need to talk about. Just a few, just a couple. Just a few. It'll go quick. You're hardly even going to notice. Because you see, John, those aren't even the only monumental moments in thrash from 1986. We've also got Creator's Extraordinary Pleasure to Kill, which also came out in 1986 and is every bit the equal of those more famous albums. John, that's our favorite of the Teutonic Big Four. You remember that there's also a German Big Four in thrash?
I sure don't.
Oh, that's a fun fact. God damn it.
Eric, I don't even remember the American Big Four in thrash.
Yes, you do. We just named 3 of them. Slayer, Metallica. Come on.
Well, Megadeth is the other one we just said.
Yeah, so who's missing?
Striper.
Oh, I hate you. Everybody hates you. Call in and tell us how much you hate John.
Operators are standing by.
1986 also brought us Dark Angels, Darkness Descends, which is one of the most visceral and overwhelming masterpieces in metal history. There were also a couple of thrash-adjacent hardcore masterpieces that I think merit a mention. Bad Brains, Eye Against Eye, and Cro-Mag's The Age of Quarrel. 1986 was truly a golden year in heavy history. One of the best ever. Perhaps the best. John, what do you think? Was 1986 the best year in heavy metal history?
Well, you know what they say, when you're organizing things and presenting information, you always want to make sure you peak right in the middle.
Structure, baby. Structure. Anyhow, as if all that weren't enough, 2 of my own personal, very favorite metal albums of all time came out in 1986. King Diamond's delectably macabre debut, Fatal Portrait, and David Lee Roth's full-length debut and finest solo statement, Eat 'Em and Smile. These are 2 absolutely perfect albums from artists who were at the very top of their game, although, as you and I both know, King Diamond certainly had still even greater artistic heights left to scale in the near future.
Oh my goodness, so much higher to climb.
So much higher. 1986 also marked the welcome return of Alice Cooper to heavy metal relevance with his delightful comeback album, Constrictor, and provided us with the last, and in my opinion, best album released during Jake E. Lee's tenure with Ozzy Osbourne, The Ultimate Sin. John, are you Team Ultimate Sin or Team Bark at the Moon?
Absolutely Team Ultimate Sin.
All right, good for you taking a stand. Additionally, 86 brought us stellar debuts from two of the most important bands from the second wave of glam metal. Poison, Look What the Cat Dragged In, and Cinderella, Night Songs, as well as one of the finest releases by any of the first wave glam metal masters, Stryper's To Hell with the Devil. Perhaps one might argue that some of this lighter music hasn't aged quite as well as the heavier stuff, but damn it if I still don't love each of those albums. John, as I recall, you're not much of a glam fan, are you?
I mean, it doesn't really resonate with me in a meaningful way.
But you do enjoy Stryper, don't you?
Yeah, I fucking do.
On a related note, while some might argue against its metal bona fides, Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet, probably the single greatest example of the intersection of hard rock and pop metal outside of Van Halen's oeuvre, also was released in 1986. And, living at that very same intersection, Europe's The Final Countdown is also up there amongst the very best albums in pop metal history.
I'm sorry, we're not counting The Final Countdown as metal, are we?
Hell yeah, baby! Cherokee, Marching on the Trail of Tears! Rock the Night! Carrie is a fun power ballad. Shut up. Great album.
I didn't say it wasn't. I am questioning whether or not it's metal.
Well, I would probably call Europe more discernibly metal than Bon Jovi.
Listen, I was going to let Bon Jovi go. I wasn't going to rehash this argument that I know we've already had.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to interject? You okay with allowing Europe and Bon Jovi with protest to enter the list?
I can't stop you. You'll just edit out anything I say.
Oh, that's true.
You'll probably cut my words together to say, oh, man, I love Bon Jovi.
Oh, I'm so glad I have that quote now. That's going to be it's going to come in really handy. I'm going to start and end every episode with that.
Oh, man, I love Bon Jovi.
I know that's a lot of goodness for any mere mortal to deal with, but I did want to note just a few somewhat lesser-known gems from this year as well. In the nascent doom metal genre, Candlemass released their seminal masterpiece, Epicus Doomicus Metallicus. Meanwhile, wonderful trad metal bands like the great Cirith Ungol, which should, properly speaking, be pronounced Kirith Ungol, with One Foot in Hell, and Chastain, on Ruler of the Wasteland, were also putting out some of their very best material in '86. Also from this year comes one of my favorite prog metal albums of all time, Fate's Warning's Awaken the Guardian. So many great albums. I could go on, but just one more. The gorgeously autumnal Samhain 3, November Coming Fire, by Glenn Danzig's stellar post-Misfits project, Samhain, which should, properly speaking, be pronounced Samhain, but is not. Sigh. Was most definitely one of the best albums of this unbelievable year. If you haven't heard that one, do seek it out.
Pretty sure you just made up all those words.
I do that sometimes. John, could you give him the killer, classic, kick-ass list one more time? S'il vous plaît.
Slayer, Rain in Blood, Metallica, Master of Puppets, Megadeth, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Creator, Pleasure to Kill, Dark Angel, Darkness Descends, Bad Brains, Eye Against Eye, Cro-Mags, The Age of Quarrel.
Now those last two, they probably aren't meaningfully heavy metal albums, but they are heavy enough that they should merit a place on any metalhead's essential listening list.
Are we making an essential listening list, or are we making a list of just the best highlights from this decade for people to listen to?
Can it be both?
No! King Diamond's Fatal Portrait.
By contrast, that one's metal as fuck.
David Lee Roth, Eat 'em and Smile. Poison, Look What the Cat Dragged In.
Cinderella, Night Songs, Striper, To Hell with the Devil, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, Europe, The Final Countdown.
Stop! Just stop! Enough already.
You're telling me.
You want to give these people some sort of a musical hernia or something? Of course, if you already know the ever-loving fuck out of all of those masterpieces, do check out some of the lesser-known gems of '86. Candlemas, Epicus Dumicus Metallicus, Sirathungal, One Foot in Hell, Chastain, Ruler of the Wasteland, Fate's Warning, Awaken the Guardian, and Samhain. Samhain 3, November Coming Fire. Such a year. I'll be honest, choosing a best metal album from 1986 is a simply preposterous notion. I'm not even going to try. Instead, let's just listen to some Slayer. Impromptu, Rain and Blood, listening break. Pause the show, click the link, bang the head. Slayer!
The best heavy metal of 1987.
Now, 87 was an absolutely fascinating year in heavy metal. John, wouldn't you agree?
I don't even know what that means.
It's fascinating. First off, the table was set for so much extraordinary music to come. Our beloved Death, who would eventually develop into arguably the greatest metal band of all time, released their debut, Scream Bloody Gore, which established the basic template for death metal evermore. Death. Additionally, two of the most influential early black metal albums, Bathory's magnificent Under the Sign of the Black Mark, and Brazil's mighty Sarcophago's grimy but great INRI, would go on to influence a whole bunch of crazy Norwegian dudes who would alter the course and story of metal forever in just a few short years. Grindcore also got its foundational touchstone via the release of Scum by not one but two distinct Napalm Death lineups. Additionally, the genre-bending eclecticism of much of 90s metal was telegraphed by excellent idiosyncratic releases by Faith No More, Introduce Yourself, and the ever weirder Celtic Frost, Into the Pandemonium. John, by 1987, we're already getting early inklings of alternative metal. Were you aware of this monumentally important subgenre, which would eventually come to the fore in the early 1990s?
Really, all I know is that the 90s is not good, so I assume at some point we have to start transitioning to bad. Is that now? Is that what we're talking about?
No, we're not going to transition to bad yet. Don't worry. We'll get to new metal eventually. That's NU with an umlaut, of course, but not today. Regardless, it's all important stuff. Of course, there were also essential albums firmly grounded in the then and there of 1987. In thrash, Anthrax added its own belated official Big Four masterpiece to the ever-growing pile with their innovative, seminal, and wildly entertaining Among the Living. Also, Testament's The Legacy was one of the most accomplished thrash debuts yet, even if it was stylistically rather indebted to Metallica and Slayer. Lastly, it's probably worth mentioning that a couple of the finest metal classics of all time were also released in 1987. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, which to my mind is the most universally accessible of all the metal classics, and is perfectly situated between not too heavy for the casual fans and not too soft for serious metalheads, as well as my sometimes own personal vote for the greatest classic metal album of all time, King Diamond's magnificent Abigail. Abigail! Read 'em and weep, puppy love o' mine.
The best heavy metal album of 1987 is absolutely, totally, and unquestionably King Diamond's Abigail. Here are some other albums. Death's Scream Bloody Gore. Bathory's Under the Sign of the Black Mark.
Call in now. Anger, rage.
It's not going to stop being funny to me. I wasn't paying attention when you read this band name's name like 2 seconds ago. How's that pronounced?
Sarcophago. I don't think you actually said Under the Sign of the Black Mark. I think you were too tickled by your own stupid joke.
Well, we've said it a few times now.
All right, fair enough.
Sarcophago, INRI, Napalm Death, Scum, Faith No More, Introduce Yourself. Celtic Frost, Into the Pandemonium. Anthrax, Among the Living. Testament, The Legacy. Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction.
Doing really nice work today, buddy.
Bathory.
Why are you going to push my buttons?
It's all I have.
All right, we're now in the final stretch. Penultimate year of the decade. Let's do it!
The best heavy metal of 1988.
Oh, 1988. We're reaching about the point where a curly-haired young Jewish lad named Eric moved beyond the stage of exploring his older brother's cassette collection and truly entered the heavy metal fray for himself. John, could you imagine how adorable 11-year-old me must have been?
Yeah, I mean, you were probably a pretty cute kid.
Yeah. Quite adorable. A metal mensch, if ever there was one. Anyhow, 1988 in heavy metal was one of them periodic no-brainer years, RE Album of the Year. The best album of 1988, and to my mind, another serious candidate for the greatest heavy metal album of all time, was Queensryche's seminal concept album masterpiece, Operation Mindcrime.
Progressive music.
It is a perfect album in every way. John, have you yet gotten off your silly duff and listened to the entire album?
Oh, it's on my to-do list.
You really should. It's going to make you a better man. All that having been said, it's only fair to note that Operation Mindcrime was actually not the only amazing progressive metal concept album masterpiece of 1988. Iron Maiden's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, quite possibly that band's most progressive album, is also fabulous. Both of these albums slay. 88 was really a good year in narrative progressive metal. Meanwhile, 1988 also provided us with the first truly magnificent death metal album. You see, John's very favorite band, Death, took their first huge leap forward on Leprosy, an album which improves upon their fun, somewhat shaggy debut in every possible way. John, do you remember the classic tune, Pull the Plug?
Sure don't.
Dummy. Pull the Plug is a Leprosy...
Hey.
What?
We talked about Death in season 1. I can't remember things we talked about in this season. You expect me to remember 3 years ago?
I guess that's a fair point. Anyway, Pull the Plug is a Leprosy period shit kicker. Open Casket, also from that album, was my own first favorite death metal tune back when I was all young, innocent, and kissy-faced. Now, while death metal had officially begun its ascent towards extreme metal glory, thrash was still cooking at a pretty impressive artistic boil as well. Slayer, Metallica, Anthrax, and Megadeth all released important work in 1988, and while none quite reached the ridiculous heights of their 1986 and 87 albums, all are pretty frickin' good. Metallica's And Justice for All, particularly, is an amazing album, and the same could be said of Slayer's doomy, moody, and very cool South of Heaven. I also thoroughly enjoy Anthrax's State of Euphoria and Megadeth's So Far So Good So What, the latter of which, incidentally, was the first thrash metal album I owned, but I don't think either of those quite merit official placement on this best of list. I'm sure both bands will be devastated. On the other extreme, second wave dirty glam got a huge boost via the excellent eponymous debut of LA Guns, a glam album that still holds up exceptionally well all these years later. John, do you at least remember us talking about LA Guns?
I'm genuinely trying to.
Oh my god. They were one of the two Guns N' Roses precursor bands, LA Guns, Hollywood Rose.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yep. I remember that conversation.
Okay, you just needed a little refresher. By the time of their debut album, they had, of course, long since evolved into their very own thing. Other utterly essential 88 albums include Bathory's, that's a th sound, just so we're clear, Bathory's first tentative stab at what would soon emerge as a shiny and new metal subgenre, Viking metal. On Blood, Fire, Death, and part the first of King Diamond's delightfully demented two-part tale of Grandma and Them. John, just to be clear, Them is the name of that album. Got it?
Uh-huh.
Good. Additionally, the young uber-extreme subgenre grindcore was further solidified and clarified with the more consistent, stable second release of Napalm Death, from enslavement to obliteration. Okay, John, could you perhaps remind us all of what we just listed?
1988's most essential heavy metal releases include Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime, Iron Maiden, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the best band ever, Death, with their first of many true masterpieces, Leprosy, Metallica and Justice for All, Slayer, South of Heaven.
I changed my mind! Add Megadeth.
Megadeth, so far, so good, so what? LA Guns, LA Guns. Bathory, Blood, Fire, Death. Napalm Death, From Enslavement to Obliteration. And King Diamond, Them.
Allow me to also offer up a couple of obscure heavy prog metal gems that people might not...
No,
You're not going to allow it?
I do not allow it.
All right, I'll talk real quiet so John doesn't hear us. I think these are important to note. I think a lot of our listeners will not be familiar with...
Oh, are we making a list of important music to know, or are we making a list of the best fucking music of this decade?
I'm trying to reach different constituencies, different levels of experience. All right, just two. It's just two albums. We've got Suffering Hour by Anacrusis and The Music of Eric Zahn by Mekong Delta. Both are just totally weird and totally wonderful. Okay, that's it. Big finish time. The end of the decade. What say we go out with a bang?
The best heavy metal of 1989.
John, can you believe it? We've reached the conclusion of the 1980 segment of our in-depth sonic heavy metal exploration.
You know, it's at times like this where one wants to stop and really reflect on the trials and tribulations they've passed through in their lives. And over the last, what feels like 17 and a half hours, as I've been reading the albums you've recommended, which will surely take longer than that to listen to, I have to say, I am relieved to find us now in 1989, which is not a feeling I ever thought I would feel. So thank you for that, Eric. Thank you for bringing me to this point.
I feel really good about where you find yourself spiritually, mentally, just as a person. It's great. Now the good news is that despite the fact that we've reached 1989 here, I do want to be clear that next season you are still going to be able to wear your hair big. You're still going to be able to wear your shoulders padded, your high-waisted denim, all that stuff next season. So I don't want you to stress about that.
And remember, everyone who subscribes to our Patreon at $100 a month or more can get pictures of just that outfit.
There we go. Now we're talking money-making schemes. All right, back to the matter at hand. 1989 was a wonderful year in metal, and another one of those particularly challenging years for which to choose a best album.
I find that hard to believe.
Now, certainly Morbid Angel's utterly extraordinary, evil, masterful death metal debut, Altars of Madness, is in that discussion. Additionally, both Brazil's Sepultura, with Beneath the Remains, and Germany's Creator, on Extreme Aggression, showed that they were every bit as great as the fabled Big Four American thrash bands. King Diamond also released quite possibly my personal favorite metal album of the decade, Conspiracy, while Dangerous Toys proved that there actually were still interesting things to say within the glam metal genre. A genre, incidentally, that was busily otherwise jumping the shark via truly goofy bands like Danger Danger and Pretty Boy Floyd. Yikes! Oh, and British legends Carcass got their business together with the first of many extreme metal masterpieces, the incredible Symphonies of Sickness. John, are you a Carcass fan?
Have you made me listen to them?
No, I have not.
Then, as always, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Ooh, I see some season 4 goodness coming. They are one of the very, very best bands ever. Maybe I'll buy you a Carcass t-shirt for your next birthday. Anyway, as wonderful as all of the above are, I would suggest that the single most important metal album of 1989 was The Real Thing by Faith No More, a band that finally got their array of eclectic influences properly and perfectly melded in '89, and also found one of the great frontmen of all time in Mike Patton, replacing prior singer Chuck Mosley to help carry them into the new decade. Oh shit! John, we've done it! A decade of decadence, presented herein in all its glorious swellness. Read back that list for 1989, would ya?
The best heavy metal of 1989 includes Morbid Angels, Altars of Madness, Sepultura's Beneath the Remains, Creator's Extreme Aggression, King Diamond, Conspiracy,
Long live the king!
Dangerous Toys, Carcass, Symphonies of Sickness, and Eric's pick for the very best metal album of 1989, Faith No More's The Real Thing.
John, are you familiar with Faith No More?
No, it sounds like a girl band.
Interesting.
Like, if you don't know their music and you just see that name, tell me that doesn't read like a girl band name.
I mean, I have trouble imagining a universe in which Faith No More isn't associated with the wacky alternative metal band that I associate it with. But maybe if I could come to it from your place of deepest ignorance, I might feel the same way. It's possible. They were a tremendously influential band on so much metal that was to come. And their singer, Mike Patton, would go on to have really one of the most impressive, creative, and truly idiosyncratic careers of just about anyone in the history of heavy metal. But all that, I believe, is a story for another time. Meanwhile, we've just about reached the end of the road for our third season. Aww. How you feeling?
Done that there's more to say.
Oh, there's more to say! We've just got a couple of orders of business before we go. Just a couple. Firstly, I want to take just one last listening break. Something that I think could really sum up all that was and is great and glorious about the heavy metal of the 1980s. I'd like to play my own carefully curated selection for the single most metal song of the entire 1980s. John, do you think you're ready?
I know what's coming.
You're not ready, are you?
No.
No, I don't think anyone's ready for this. No, look, I have thought long and hard about it. Certainly many tunes by total badass bands, clear masters, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Dio, Metallica, many others. All of that springs to mind, and I get it. Makes sense.
The astute listener will notice by the tone of Eric's voice that he is about to make an absolutely batshit suggestion.
I just wanted to go for something I thought was a little less obvious.
Yes, why would I pick the clear best song when I could pick a weird best song?
I didn't say best, I said most metal. I think that's an important distinction. You know, when I searched my soul and my heart, I knew that only one band could be chosen for this extraordinary honor. John, I sent you a picture of the beautiful hunks of man flesh that comprise the band Manowar. Do you remember that picture?
Yeah.
Oiled up he-men clad in leather loincloths. Now that is the true spirit of 1980s fucking metal.
Yes! 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 Yes!
To my mind, nothing in this world is quite so metal as Manowar. They of the iconic mantra, death to false metal. Death to false metal indeed. And so, my pick for the most metal song of the entire decade is the final track off of Manowar's wonderful 1982 debut, Battle Hymn. Pause the podcast, click the link, raise your sword in the air, and feel the true power of heavy metal. By moonlight, we ride 10,000 side by side, with swords drawn held high. Our whips and armor shine. Hail to thee, our infantry, still brave beyond the grave, all sworn the eternal vow. The time to strike is now. Fuck me. I swear, on the final verse of that song, where singer Eric Adams goes up the octave, I could lift a frickin' truck over my head. I get so damn pumped. John, are you pumped? You must be pumped.
I mean, do you want me to answer honestly?
Yeah, pumpedly.
I enjoyed the intro. I thought the first verse was good. By the time we get to the B section, I was bored. And then I wasn't really paying attention by the end because it bored me.
Oh my God. John! All right. Anyway, why don't you use the incredible, intoxicating power given to us by Manowar to accomplish your next task, which is to read a much more streamlined list consisting of approximately one-ish representative metal masterpiece from each year of the decade. An actual 80s heavy metal listener's starter pack, if you will. Read this bad boy into the HM 101 permanent record.
The official HM 101 year-by-year 80s metal starter pack consists of the following albums. From 1980, Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz.
It hurts my soul not to include Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell and Iron Maiden's self-titled debut as well, so listen to those too.
From 1981, a split decision, goddammit, Def Leppard's High and Dry.
Light.
And Venom's Welcome to Hell.
Heavy.
From 1982, another split decision, Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast and Judas Priest's Screaming for Vengeance. From 1983, Eric admits that, yes, you probably should fucking listen to Metallica's fucking Kill 'Em All. But he's going to tell you to listen to something else instead, and that's Merciful Fate's Melissa. 1984, Iron Maiden's Power Slave.
But don't miss Judas Priest's Defenders of the Faith.
1985, Slayer's Hell Awaits. 1986, more magnificent albums than you can shake a stick at, but the split decision for the most essential of the bunch goes to Slayer's Rain in Blood and Metallica's Master of Puppets. 1987, King Diamond's Abigail. From 1988, Queensryche, Operation Mindcry. And finally, from 1989, everyone's favorite girl band, it's Faith No More's The Real Thing.
Holy shitballs. We did it. It's did. Thanks, 1980s. It's been a lot of fun. Onward to the 90s we go. Ish. You see, as implied by our compelling advertisement from considerably earlier in the episode, Season 4 will be a mix of a bunch of table-setting episodes where we're going to be tracing subgenre developments from the 80s into the 90s, as well as some amount of looking into specific heavy metal artists and albums that emerged during the first half of the 1990s. And probably an assortment of other fun surprises, too. John, won't all that be a delight?
Oh, it's gonna be something.
Indeed. I also do think it's time we get seriously serious about the idea of a Heavy Metal 101 Patreon, so that we can start to put some moolah into this podcasting adventure of ours and help it to continue to grow and evolve. How does that sound to you, mon frere?
Counterpoint, could be fun to just continually mention perks that people can never actually get.
Just give him something tantalizing that is actually unobtainable?
Yeah, that's how I've lived most of my life.
All right, well, we'll have to think about it. But I like the idea of a Patreon. I think it could be really nice. We'll see how much interest there is. Maybe write us a note if that's the kind of thing you'd be interested in. Or maybe I'll do a poll with the episode. That might be a useful way of garnering the amount of interest. But keep your eyes out for a Patreon announcement on our social media with the promise of exclusive content, the ability to get your fantastic subject ideas more directly into our episode queue, and the heartfelt satisfaction that comes from directly contributing to possibly the most important historical survey in the history of our beloved genre, heavy effing metal. Further bulletins as events warrant. Meanwhile, John, for just one last time in Season 3, could you tell the nice people how they can reach us during our break and beyond?
Hey, if you want to write about how much you hate Bat Hori,
Ooh, you suck.
please feel free to do so by reaching out to us at heavymetal101podcast@gmail.com. or on social media. You know, we're on Facebook at Heavy Metal 101 Podcast. Apparently, we're on X still at Heavy_101. We're on Instagram at Heavy Metal 101 Podcast. And then we're on TikTok, apparently, at Heavy Metal 101 Podcast.
We would indeed so love to hear from you. Additionally, any and all 5-star ratings and reviews are always so appreciated and are a great way to let people know about what we are doing here at HM101.
Any review. Write a bad review. Just write a review. Generate interest in the show by talking about how much you hate me. It's fine.
Yeah, I think if your bad review focuses explicitly on John, I think I can accept that. That'd be okay. I'll also remind you, because I literally don't think I've ever said it, if you haven't subscribed...
Is it reminding? How can you remind someone of something you've never said?
Well, they're aware of the existence of the concept, possibly, that one can subscribe to a show.
You do not know what our audience does and does not know.
Well, there's probably a little button that will allow you to get all of our episodes right into your feed, your queue, your whatever thing you got to look at. And it's worth clicking on so that you don't miss any of John's brilliant, insightful, and witty comments.
Bat Hoary!
You don't want to miss that. So, John, it's the end of our 3rd season. Can you believe it?
Genuinely no.
It's crazy. You know, when we started this podcast, you were but a lowly dance musician, a boy, really. Now, you're an internationally renowned conductor and pedagogue with a tenure-track position. Yes, everybody, that's right. John is in a tenure-track position. At long last, John, you truly are a man. Would you agree with me that you have Heavy Metal 101 to thank for this impressive personal and career trajectory?
Well, it certainly was a big motivating factor in me trying to move.
To get as geographically far away from me as humanly possible and my pernicious influence.
I didn't really succeed. I only got like halfway across the country, but here we are.
Plus now, with this wonderful technology we have, we can meet face to face basically daily if we want to.
I know.
Well, anyhow, thank you for all of your lovely podcasting work. You, sir, are the best, good buddy.
Hey, it's my pleasure to come here and speak negatively about the things that you love.
You do a great job. And much and many thanks to all of you listeners out there as well. We love you bunches and bunches and bunches. Check out our social media for further info about that there Patreon and also about our glorious return for Season 4. And until then, stay heavy, keep one foot in the gutter and one fist in the gold, and be excellent to each other. Bye-bye, beloved listeners. We'll be back before you know it. John, say goodbye to the nice listeners.
Goodbye.